I trust that these history bits that we have been sharing on each Sabbath have been edifying and also informational.
My God.
Our purpose for providing the history bit is to help educate Zion in the history of your faith. Much of the time with the transmission of the word and the message of Messiah from generation to generation, it has come down through the channel of religious systems, be it the Western Roman Catholic Church or be it the various denominations within the framework of Protestantism, whether it's the various Baptist denominations or the holiness denominations or Pentecostal denominations. But in some form or another, the transmission of the message of Messiah has come down through these different religious systems, and as it has been passed down, it has not always been provided with the information that concerns itself with our ancient history. And we have millions of believers who are simply unaware of the history of their faith. And so it's our goal to help to provide that information to Zion so that Zion can know what it is that's a part of their faith. And so as we share these history bits, I trust that it's helping to fill in the gaps, fill in the missing pieces, to fill in those holes in our understanding of the history of our faith, so that you understand that if you was saved as a Baptist, as they say, or saved as a Methodist, or saved as a Pentecostal, that there's a whole lot more to your faith than just your denominational perspective that you received and that you've anchored your trust in. But that there is a great body of history that extends from the 2nd century all the way through to the 17th century that most believers are simply unaware of, and they need to be informed about so that they can know how to practice their faith in the way in which our ancient ancestors practiced it. So today what I'm going to do, I'm going to share some information with regard to the history of Sabbath keeping. I'm going to share about 4 quotes, and this shouldn't be too long, but I want to share these quotes because these are quotes from historians over the centuries that have dug out this information so that we can understand what the ancient church, the Messianic Israelite Community, practiced. And so I first want to look at a statement with regard to the believers of the 2nd century.
Yes.
This statement says, "It is certain that the ancient Sabbath did remain and was observed together with the celebration of the Lord's Day by the Christians of the East Church above 300 years after the Savior's death." And this was written in a book called A Learned Treatise of the Sabbath, page 77. This particular statement, what it's telling us is that from the 2nd century moving forward all the way up into the 4th century or in the 300s, that the churches of the East were keeping the Sabbath and celebrating their worship services on the Sabbath. I'm going to continue reading the other quotes and then I'm going to comment on those. The next has to do with the 3rd century. There are 2 statements I'm going to read out of here. In this particular statement, it has to do with the fact of the Sabbath being celebrated among the churches of the East from Palestine all the way to India. So for those who have a map or familiar with what a map looks like, Palestine is that area right now that is regarded as the land of Israel. Moving from the coast of Palestine, the Mediterranean Sea, and going all the way over to India, where Thomas was the apostle of India. Listen to what this says about that whole region. It says, as early as AD 225, there existed large bishoprics or conferences of the Church of the East, Sabbath keeping, stretching from Palestine to India. This was written by Mingana in a book called Early Spread of Christianity, Volume 10, page 460. Now, most people are familiar with the fact that the ancient church worshipped on the Sabbath. Now, peoples who are from the East, that's a common thing. Those of us who are on the West, which includes us, in our teaching and what we have learned, we have been taught almost the opposite. But this is history. You can't deny history, y'all. Next statement I want to read. This one is also with regard to the 3rd century. And this is with respect to just early Christians in general. Quote, the 7th-day Sabbath was solemnized by Christ, the apostles, and the primitive Christians until the Laodicean Council did in manner quite abolish the observance of it. This is in a book called The Dissertation of the Lord's Day, pages 33 and 34. Now, what this statement is telling us here is that in the first few centuries, it was a known truth. Messiah consecrated the Shabbat to continue. The apostles continued to keep the Sabbath, and the primitive Christians kept the Sabbath. It wasn't until the 4th century in 365 AD in the Council of Laodicea, and this is based upon this historian statement, that they abolished the Sabbath and took Sunday as a day to make that the Sabbath. This is something that happened in the Catholic Church. 4th and last statement that I want to share with us. And this statement is noted with regard to Sabbath keeping in the 5th century. This would be in the 400s AD or CE. And this is with respect to the world. Listen to this particular statement by this ancient historian here. It says, for although almost all churches throughout the world, did you listen to this? It says, for although almost all churches throughout the world celebrated the sacred mysteries. That's when we have the communion, that was called the sacred mysteries. Celebrated the sacred mysteries on the Sabbath of every week. Yet, I want you to listen to this. This is history. Yet, the Christians of Alexandria, that's Alexandria, Egypt, and Rome, on account of some ancient tradition, refused to do this. This is noted in a book called Ecclesiastical History by Socrates, Book 5, Chapter 22, page 289. Now, the purpose for me sharing this as a history bit is to help us to understand that in the early centuries of the Messianic Israelite community, the Sabbath was a huge part of the worship. And the thing that we have to understand about what happened in history that brought about transition is that the 4th century Roman church began to feel as though it had great power and primacy because of the Roman Emperor Constantine having a favor upon the church in Rome. They began to make changes. See, among the historians, it's common knowledge that the church in Rome and the church in Alexandria, Egypt, both ceased to keep the Sabbath and made changes. And as a result of their doing so, because of the power of the Roman emperor and the power and the muscle of Rome in connection with the church in Rome, they were able to spread throughout all of the West and to also influence the churches of the East. So that after a period of time, when I say that period of time, we're talking about, roughly like around about almost 800 years, we have a church system now that has almost completely washed the Sabbath out.
My God.
But our desire is to help Zion to understand the history of its faith. Because the Shabbat, the Sabbath, is a part of our faith. And unless we understand it from a historical perspective, then we will begin to miss out on all of the blessings that the Most High has intended. And so I hope that this information has been helpful to inform us so that we can begin to realize that the Sabbath was not something that the early saints thought had passed away.
My God.
See, we have been taught this. And for those of us who have come to an understanding of the history of our faith, we recognize that it is important that we provide information and help to give the saints resources so that they can be solidified in their faith. That when someone comes to you and they say to you, well, why do you keep the Sabbath, or why do you worship on the Sabbath? The Sabbath is passed away. No, it ain't passed away. The Sabbath is what the apostles and what Messiah and what the ancient Messianic Israelite community practiced. The Almighty wants us to get back to what was in his original system with respect to his people. So be encouraged, and I trust that information will encourage you.